Why is the US really offering Africa seats on the UN Security Council? Why now, after almost 80 years, is the US so suddenly interested in African representation? It is unknown if this is a move toward justice or just another way to tighten its grip on global power. There must be some hidden motives at play in this seemingly generous offer. Or maybe the West is secretly terrified of a powerful Africa at the world's decision-making table. Is this offer about fairness, or is it just a distraction from a deeper global imbalance? Let's find out. For nearly 80 years, the UN Security Council (UNC) has been dominated by 5 permanent members: China, France, Russia, the UK, and the US, who wield the ultimate veto power. This arrangement has given these countries control over global decisions, from sanctions to military interventions. Recently, the US proposed adding 2 permanent seats for African nations to the UNSC. But there's a catch. These seats would not come with veto power, the very tool that gives the Security Council its teeth. So, why should Africa settle for seats without real influence on the UN Security Council? The offer of 2 permanent seats for African nations on the UN Security Council sounds like a long overdue step toward addressing global inequality. After all, Africa has been calling for representation at the UNSC for decades. But what is being offered isn't empowerment, it's tokenism. The veto is not just a symbol of power, it's the mechanism through which the world's most powerful nations shape global policy. The P5 can veto any decision they disagree with, giving them the ultimate authority over matters of war, peace, and international sanctions. Without this power, Africa would still be on the sidelines, watching decisions being made but unable to influence them. This offer, then, isn't about giving Africa a seat at the table. It's about keeping Africa in the room, but ensuring that the real decisions are still made by the same old players. The US and its allies are offering the illusion of inclusion without the reality of power. Some might argue that even without the veto, permanent seats would give Africa a greater voice on the global stage. After all, it would mark the first time that African nations had a permanent presence at the Security Council. But this perspective misses the point. A seat without veto power is little more than a consolation prize. It's a way for the P5 to appease Africa without truly sharing power. And make no mistake, power is what this is all about. So if this offer is so hollow, why is the US making it now? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Africa's geopolitics, economy, and changing landscape. Let's continue now. The timing of this offer is no coincidence. For decades, Africa has been calling for more representation at the UN, but those calls have largely been ignored. Now suddenly, the US is offering permanent seats on the UNSC, but without veto power. Why now? What's changed? To understand the real motivations behind this offer, we need to look at the shifting global power dynamics. The US and its Western allies are no longer the undisputed leaders of the global order. China and Russia are gaining influence, and the global South, including Africa, is rising in economic and political importance. The West is losing its grip, and this offer of permanent seats is a way to keep Africa within its sphere of influence. By offering Africa seats without veto power, the US can maintain the appearance of fairness and progress while ensuring that the real power dynamics remain unchanged. It's a way of managing Africa, keeping the continent close, but not giving it the tools to challenge the global order that the US has built and maintained for decades. So, is Africa the only region being sidelined? Africa isn't the only region being denied real power at the UN Security Council. Other rising global powers, like India and Brazil, have also been excluded from the veto club. India, with its 1.4 billion people and growing economic and military influence, has long called for a permanent seat on the UNSC. Brazil, the largest country in Latin America, plays a crucial role in regional stability and global trade. Yet neither of these nations has been given a permanent seat, let alone veto power. The exclusion of India and Brazil is no accident. It's part of a broader strategy by the P5 to maintain their dominance over global decision-making. The veto is the key to this dominance. It allows the P5 to block any decision that threatens their interests, ensuring that global policy remains aligned with their goals. By keeping India, Brazil, and Africa out of the Veto Club, the P5 are preserving a global power structure that dates back to the end of World War II. But the world has changed dramatically since then. The rise of new powers like India and Brazil, along with the growing importance of Africa, challenges the legitimacy of the current system. The P5 knows that reforming the UNSC to include these nations would weaken their grip on power, and that's why they're so reluctant to do it. Here the people ask why Africa and other nations have not responded with anger toward them being sidelined. Africa's patience in the face of repeated marginalization is both admirable and frustrating. For decades, African nations have played by the rules, hoping that their calls for reform would eventually be answered. But time and again, the UN has offered symbolic gestures instead of real change. The offer of permanent seats without veto power is just the latest example of this empty diplomacy. So why hasn't Africa walked away? One reason is that Africa still believes in the principles of multilateralism, the idea that global problems can only be solved through cooperation between nations. African leaders see the UN as the best platform for addressing issues like climate change, poverty, and conflict. They want to be part of the global conversation, even if that conversation is deeply flawed. But there's a growing recognition that the UN Security Council, in its current form, isn't serving Africa's interests. The system is rigged in favor of the P5, and symbolic gestures like permanent seats without veto power won't change that. And Africa has rejected this proposal of seats with no veto. As Naledi Pandor also said, "We are not interested in being token members of the Security Council. Africa must be treated as an equal player, not as a secondary actor." But why did Africa want this in the first place? At its core, Africa's struggle for representation on the UNSC is about more than just gaining a seat at the table. It's about reclaiming its place in the global order, a place that has been denied for centuries. Africa has been exploited, colonized, and marginalized for too long, and this fight is about righting those historical wrongs. But it's also about the future. Africa is rising. Its population is booming, its economies are growing, and its political influence is expanding. The West knows this, which is why the offer of permanent seats without veto power is so disingenuous. The P5 wants to keep Africa close, but not give it the tools to shape its own destiny. This isn't just about the UNSC, it's about global power dynamics. Africa's fight for real representation is part of a larger movement in the global South to challenge the dominance of the West. The BRICS alliance, which includes South Africa, is already working to create alternative systems of global governance. Africa's role in this movement is critical, and its leaders must decide whether they want to continue playing by the West's rules or forge a new path. The West argues that Africa should be cautious in challenging the existing global order. They say that too much disruption could lead to instability, both for Africa and the world. But the current system is already unstable. The longer the P5 cling to their outdated power structure, the more volatile the global situation becomes. Africa's fight for representation is not about creating chaos, it's about building a more just and equitable world. Now that Africa has been offered seats without veto power, is this offer really about empowering the continent or just a symbolic gesture? Would rejecting the offer and demanding full veto power force the West to confront its own hypocrisy? Let us know in the comments section. If Africa doesn't demand real power now, when will it ever get the chance to rewrite its own destiny? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: African politics, economy, and increasing power. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Tell us what you think in the comment section. Like and share the video, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our African videos. It's the best way to support us.